More than 3,000 people were held aboard a Royal Caribbean ship before they were allowed to leave. We'll tell you what happened in Hong Kong. The Ruby Princess made her way under the Golden Gate Bridge back to San Francisco amidst what the media is calling a COVID outbreak. We're going to bring it down to reality. Plus, we turn to a cruising expert to learn his advice for cruising in early 2022. The CEO of Port Canaveral said he's not worried about a cruise shutdown anytime soon. All this coming up on Midships. Hey, welcome to the Midships YouTube channel. I'm your Captain Corey, and thank you so much for stopping by the channel today. Well, as you can see, we are officially back in our Central Florida home studio here for the Midships channel, and there's tons of cruise news, so we're not going to waste any more time. We're going to hop right in with some news coming out of the West Coast. From Fox to KTVU, a cruise ship named Ruby Princess docked in San Francisco Thursday morning with a few mostly symptomless COVID-positive passengers, passing under the Golden Gate Bridge just before sunrise. Princess Cruises sent an email stating that they'd randomly tested a quarter of the roughly 700 passengers aboard the ship and found that 12 were positive with coronavirus and that all had no or mild symptoms. The ship was filled to about only 1/3 of its normal capacity. Passengers said they had a great time and the cruise felt very safe. Joe Donnelly, a passenger who disembarked from the ship, said the following: "There was plenty of room to get around. Everybody seemed to be happy. We didn't see any problems." Donnelly described the atmosphere on board Ruby Princess as one where everyone wore masks and there were plenty of places to wash your hands. He said he wasn't worried at all. According to the CDC, all 92 cruise ships with paying passengers right now are currently under investigation for COVID outbreaks on board. The Ruby Princess included is under a yellow color-coded status, which means at least 0.1% of passengers on board have confirmed COVID cases. The article goes on to say, but this cruise ship COVID situation is now a far cry from what it was 2 years ago. In March of 2020, during the early stages of the pandemic, the Grand Princess was rerouted to the Bay Area, anchoring at the port of Oakland, where 3,000 passengers had to remain in quarantine as the pandemic ensued. During the next month, more than 100 people were found to have contracted the virus, and 7 people sadly died. That was at the beginning of the COVID pandemic, and for many, one of the first times they'd heard about what was back then called the novel coronavirus. Now, 2 years later, there were no crews in hazmat suits rushing everyone off the Ruby Princess. In fact, many passengers said the cruise felt like pre-pandemic times. Wow, look at that. Congratulations, KTVU Fox 2, for writing an honest-to-God news story about cruising. It's so refreshing to finally see a journalist take some time, interview people, and actually compare cruising now to what cruising was at the beginning of the pandemic. So great job to Allie and Keith, the writers of this story from San Francisco. Now let's keep the good news rolling, but head over to the East Coast of the US and hear from the CEO of Port Canaveral on what he thinks is the future of cruising. By My News 13 Orlando. A few days into 2022, Captain John Murray's prediction for the new year is that the cruise industry will not see another mass shutdown like the one that dominated the majority of the pandemic thus far. Speaking with reporters on Wednesday morning, the CEO of Port Canaveral said things are trending in the right direction for the port, and he didn't see the pandemic stopping that. The cruise lines have the protocols in place, as do we at the ports, to manage these infections. We've done this from the very beginning. The article goes on to remind us that last month the US CDC elevated a travel notice for cruising to the highest, recommending even vaccinated travelers avoid cruises. But Port Canaveral CEO Murray said the level 4 designation for cruising won't slow things down for the industry. And he went on to make a really good point that I haven't heard yet so far, and I'm going to share it with you now because I think it's a pretty important one. Murray said the following: if you follow the CDC website to where the announcements are, and he's talking about the travel advisory announcements, the cruise advisory falls right in line with every other country in the world, basically. Ireland's on the list of level 4, Germany's on the list, all level 4s. So, cruising is essentially just one more country, so to speak, that's on the level 4 list. Currently, there are 10 ships that call Port Canaveral home, with a record 11th ship coming January 24th when the Carnival Liberty arrives at the Space Coast. I love the Carnival Liberty. That's the first cruise I ever took. So some very interesting, unique points coming out from Port Canaveral and, might I say, some very positive news. Now, I'd like to hear your opinion on the future of cruising. Go ahead and leave it down in the comments below. While you're down there, I'd highly suggest checking out the description box underneath this video, because in there you're going to find a link to the Midships Instagram cruise. It's a great place to stay up to date with what's going on behind the scenes here at the Midships channel. Also down there's a link to my Amazon influencers page, and that's a place where you can find all of the cruise swag items that I take with me on every single cruise. Most of them cost 10 or 15 bucks, and they're all shipped from Amazon Prime. Plus, just clicking on those links does help support this channel and our work just a little bit. Thank you so much. Now back to the cruise news. Well, Royal Caribbean is in the news for what went down aboard Spectrum of the Seas in Hong Kong. Let's learn a little bit more from News Nation USA. Thousands held on cruise ship amid Hong Kong COVID scare. More than 3,000 passengers and crew were held on a major cruise liner in Hong Kong on Wednesday morning after a COVID scare prompted authorities to order the ship to return to port. 9 people on board Royal Caribbean Spectrum of the Seas were identified as close contacts to a positive COVID case. The 9 close contacts were sent to a government quarantine center after the ship returned to port on January 5th. Roughly 2,500 passengers and an additional 1,200 crew were then told to remain on board the ship and await coronavirus testing. In a statement from the Hong Kong government, they said they were concerned the 9 people could have been in contact with a positive Omicron COVID case. Hong Kong reported their very first Omicron COVID case last week, following nearly 3 months without any local cases popping up. And in addition to the cancellation of the Spectrum of the Seas cruise, all future cruises to nowhere are off the table in Hong Kong for the time being. I highly recommend sticking around because one of the industry's foremost travel experts has written a fantastic article about cruising in early 2022 during the Omicron spike. From RoyalCaribbeanBlog.com by Matt Hochberg. My best advice for going on a cruise in early 2022. That perfect cruise itinerary has been booked for months. You've got everything ready to go, and the notion of canceling your cruise seems unfathomable. However, the rapid spread of the Omicron variant is giving just about everyone second thoughts about their travel plans. If you decide to go ahead with your cruise, here are some things Matt Hochberg recommends doing so your cruise is more enjoyable. And this is a pretty lengthy and comprehensive article, which is linked in the description below this video. I'm going to share a few points from this, and if you're going on a cruise, I would highly suggest spending the next 10 or 15 minutes reading this article in its entirety. So the first point the author makes is to be okay with changes, especially last-minute ones. If nothing else, you need to be totally fine with an email or letter in your stateroom informing you that your plans will be changing. Whether it's a new health protocol or a new itinerary altogether, travel right now is full of changes. And the next thing you need to understand as a cruiser in early 2022 is that you need to assume there could be less things to do on board your ship. Cruise ships are packed with many activities and events on board, but with COVID affecting crew just like passengers, the ships can sometimes become a little short-staffed. The result of less crew is there may be less activities offered on board your cruise. The author advises to plan on a cruise that resembles a classic cruise experience rather than one where you could count on every single event and activity being open at all times. Matt Hochberg goes on to say that if he were to cruise tomorrow, which he probably is, the man cruises quite a lot from what I've seen, he says he would pack more books or card games so that he could enjoy that almost anywhere, anytime. And the next suggestion from the author is now's the time to try to upgrade your cabin. Royal Caribbean said there's been an increase in cancellations in near-term sailings due to Omicron fears, which means cabin upgrades could be easier to snag. And because I would like you to read this article yourself on Royal Caribbean Blog, I'm not going to spoil the 6 or 7 other fantastic suggestions that Matt makes on things that you should do if you're cruising in the next couple of months. If you love cruising and you made it this far today, why haven't you subscribed to the channel yet? I put out new videos every day, and we have a goal to have 10,000 subscribers by my birthday in the middle of March. So do me a favor and help us reach our goal. And YouTube's algorithm will push my video out to more cruisers like you if you slap that thumbs up button. Thanks so much for stopping by the channel today, and until tomorrow, we'll see ya on the Midships.
La 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 la.